Going on, Dudson? Coming straight at you from Union, New Jersey in my filthy ass apartment. So I'm just kind of winging it here. I figured probably the best way to get an idea of what to buy, coming from me, I'll just take you through kind of what I take and just kind of show you my kit or loadout, if you will. So I'm going to start from the bottom up and I can watch myself on my fancy Apple Watch. So first things first, I think when it comes to weighting, and obviously the lower part of your body, that's all there really is to talk about equipment-wise. The most crucial piece of equipment you've got is a good quality pair of wading boots. On these, you'll see I've got studs on there, but most commonly you'll see felt soles. These are Corker's Dark Horse brand. And it's really important to keep something that's going to give you grip and slip rocks. You don't just want to wear tennis shoes over, over neoprene waders, because you're going to slip and fall, and it's no bueno. So make sure you have a pair of felt soled wading boots. And I would definitely recommend, if you have a chance to try them on with the waders you're going to use prior to going up there, I would do that as well. Make sure they fit. If you wind up having to go and buy a pair of wading boots, go ahead and expect to buy them a little bit large. Like I normally wear a size 13 shoe, but after the neoprene booty and thicker socks that I wear normally when I'm wearing waders, I had to buy a size 15 in my wading boot. So I think the Corker's Greenback would probably be my top recommendation. They run about $100. They come with the interchangeable sole system. So you can change out to rubber soles if you're going to be hiking a long way to where you're fishing, and then switch them out for felt, or you can switch them out for a studded sole, whatever works best for you. Kind of moving up next is what you're going to want to wear under your waders. Typically, cotton's going to be the enemy when you're wearing waders. Because for a nylon pair of waders to breathe and actually be comfortable throughout the day, whatever you're wearing under it needs to breathe also. So if the water's going to be a little bit colder, if we're talking low 50s, upper 40s, I will typically wear a pair of my fleece Cabela's wading pants underneath. They've got the little stirrup on the leg so they don't ride up, and these are awesome. They breathe really well. You don't sweat out the inside of your waders at all. Very, very comfortable, and the softness of the fleece won't rub up and be abrasive towards the inside of the wader, because that will also help to erode the wader in the crotch and along the seams, particularly the crotch, though. It's normally the first wear point on a pair of waders. When it's a little bit warmer, I'd say if I was to put on waders when the water is in the up middle 50s, upper 50s, I'll typically wear just this is just a cheap Walmart Russell brand cold weather base layer, stretchy material. Under Armour, Nike, they all make them. Just get the cold weather base layer. Super comfortable to walk around in all day, never bunch up, and they breathe obviously really well. So I guess get my broken pair of waders out of the closet here. Got a pair of Simms Freestone waders. Good and comfortable. You definitely want to try them on. It's more important in my mind to have the waist and chest correct than it is the length, as long as they're not too short. Definitely get them bigger rather than shorter. They may look a little baggy on you, but it doesn't matter. It's not the point. If you wind up having to buy waders, you can get some relatively inexpensive ones, but waders, the name brands, really do last better, and you get a lot better product. Think Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's has kind of a $100 entry-level wader that's not too bad. If you want to step up a little bit, I would suggest the Simms Tributary, which you can get MSRP is for like $180. Good pair, and they last a long time as long as you take care of them. Going up, you see obviously we have belt loops on waders. Well, what do you need belt loops on waders for? And that's because you want to be wearing a wading belt. If you're borrowing waders, make sure you have some kind of a nylon belt you can run through here, something that you can wrap around. That way, if you do fall in, your waders don't fill with water quite as quickly. It's still not going to be fun, but it's better than, you know, being filled up to your chest with water. And that's about all there is to these. Oh, I guess we'll talk about kind of how they're connected at the foot here. You know, you just got your neoprene booty. As far as socks go, it's going to depend on what you're comfortable with, depending on how cold the water is. I normally get I have a thick pair of Dick's Sporting Goods brand Field and Stream wool socks that I normally wear when it's colder. Kind of keep your toes from freezing up quite as quickly. But if it's warmer, you can get away with athletic socks as long as it fits with your wading boots. You'll see if you do have to buy a pair of waders, make sure you get a pair that has a what's called a gravel guard here. And what this is it's a part of the wader that actually wraps over the top of the boot, and it keeps gravel and rocks from getting down in between the boot and the booty here on the waders, and, you know, boring a hole in here, which will then leak. And, you know, the neoprene booty is not cheap to replace. It nearly screws the cost of the wader. So if you do have to do that, make sure you get waders with a gravel guard. Make sure you use the gravel guard on your waders. Piece of equipment I think I mentioned to you in text would be a wading staff. If you're not used to wading in swift water, if you're new to it, maybe if you're not as sure on your feet, I would highly recommend going ahead and investing the money in a wading staff or a Trek pole, depending on what your budget's going to allow. Because if you don't, you might wind up with, you know, a nice pair of waders with a big giant hole in it, like I, you know, and I fish pretty frequently, but it happens to everybody. You lose your balance, you can't get it back. You know, if I'd been using a wading staff, I wouldn't have to send my waders back to Montana, and I wouldn't have to be wet wading every time I go right now. So speaking of which, that's another option. For the Gunnison River, I think it's a tailwater, and it stays pretty cold year round. It probably is in the mid 50s right now, and you would seriously entertain wet wading. The formula you typically use to determine if it's going to be comfortable enough for you is if the water temperature and the air temperature, if you add those together and they're equal to 100 or greater, then you're typically going to be comfortable wet wading. But it's not for everybody. You know, you do have to acclimate to it a little bit. It is cold when you first get in, but on a warm summer day, it's really refreshing. But yeah, it's an option to keep open. Keep in mind, you still have to have wading boots. You'd need to get a pair of wet wading socks, which is just the booty on the wader, and it just fills up the gap where, you know, you normally have the booty on the wader, and it lets you wear them, let you wear your wading boots without waders, because you still need that for traction. So I guess moving up my body, talk a little bit about my vest and what I carry with me to carry all of my equipment. I guess we'll start on the back. As you can see, I've got a nice Fish Pond Nomad Emerger net. If you're going to do some fishing by yourself, I would probably pick up a net. You don't have to spend an arm and a leg for one. If you get one that has the like the all rubber basket like this one, makes it tremendously easier to get your fly unhooked. If it has like the cloth twine basket on it, like you see on the classic nets, if you get a fly in that, it's a bitch to get out. So this one's really easy. It's a lot better for the fish too. The rubber basket's not bad at all on their scales, and it's really the best environmentally friendly, fish friendly option for you. And you don't have to spend an arm and a leg on these, but if you do some fishing by yourself, I definitely recommend a net. You can see I've got a magnetic attachment on here just because I like to carry it on my back. Attaches just like that. Probably the best option to save a little bit of money is when you get your wading belt, just take your net and just stick it back in your just in your back like that. And when you catch a fish, just pull it out like that. That's the way a lot of people do it, even with more expensive packs. You know, it's kind of to each his own, but that's a perfectly valid way to carry a net. It's easy, easy to get out, easy to put back. Keeping going on, I'm just kind of looking and seeing what I can talk about on my vest. Okay, tools. Something I would definitely recommend for changing terminal tackle, changing flies, retying if you're going to go on yourself or go by yourself is at least a decent pair of nippers, which all this is basically fingernail clippers without the hinge action of the lever on the fingernail clippers. If you want to use fingernail clippers, there's nothing wrong with that, but these are, when your hands are wet, you don't have to mess with getting the lever in the right place and lining it up and it slips, you know, so I've actually got a couple of nippers here. I got one with a hook sharpener to knock burrs off of my flies when they get hung up on rocks. And it's really common, as you can see, a lanyard. People just put them around their neck, and it's just right here at your neck. I use the Zinger on my vest. That way it's retractable. I just pull it down, bring it back. And I don't have to worry about getting tangled up and choked with a lanyard or anything like that. Another tool you're going to want to have is a pair of, I always call them hemostats. I've heard them called forceps, but you want to have a pair of these for tying on flies and stuff. Some of the flies you may be dealing with, if the Gunnison River is a tailwater, like I think it is, I'm not really familiar. A lot of the time you'll have to be fishing smaller flies, and I'm digging one out right now to show you. I've got I think this is about a size 18 or 20 zebra midge. Kind of zoom in a little bit. See if I can see it. It's hard to see, but that little bastard is tiny. You're gonna have a hell of a time trying to tie that on with your fingers and that little tiny line. So when I just hook it on there and lock it into place, you know, I can sit here and bend it. I can bend the hook. It's not going anywhere. So I can sit here and actually tie just using the forceps or the hemostats rather than sitting here trying to mess with it with my fingers. So I definitely recommend these. And also it's great for getting the fly out of the trout's mouth. You just go in there, knock it out, dig it out, whatever. It lets you get into a tight space because it's basically like micro needle nose pliers. What you'll see a lot is guys will also put these on a Zinger, like I had my nippers on. This one, I actually have a handy dandy little slot here on my vest that I just click it into and keep it here. Part of the reason for that is when it's on the Zinger, I used to have it on a Zinger, and it's when you go down to unhook a fish in the net, it doesn't always want to reach. It's kind of a pain in the ass to deal with. And when you're tying a fly on, if you're trying just to spin it to make your clinch knot, it doesn't like, the Zingers don't like that. So that's how I do that. Let me see. Okay, probably see I've got a spool of fishing line on here, and this is my tippet holder. This is what I keep all my tippet and my cider material for my Bureau rod. And I just kind of keep that handy, and I'll go over that a little bit more when I talk about how to rig up like a indicator rig and the parts of your typical your leader for trout fishing. So going through, trying to see what else I've got. Fly boxes, of course. I've got the nice Fish Pond tacky fly boxes, which I'll kind of show you that. Which it's not very full, but with the exception of that big bastard and that big son of a bitch right there. Yeah, I tied all these myself. So, oh, and that sulfur, I didn't tie that. I didn't tie that Comparadun sulfur. Yeah, I tied all those. Oh, my phone's upside down. Here we go. So, yep, just a fly box to carry my flies. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Once you get done with the, when you get done at the fly shop, you can just take the cup with you, or you can get a cheapy fly box just to carry everything. Makes it a little more condensed, less cumbersome. The reason I actually bought this vest, technically it's called a tech pack. because it actually has, you know, a backpack, an expandable backpack here on the back of the vest. And I like it because, you know, I could do this. I can open it up, and it's super handy. I like carrying water, some drinks, you know, I may take a beer, some Gatorade, beef jerky, snacks. I like putting my wallet and my phones in there. If I have to take a call or a text message, I just use my watch. Keeps everything away from the water. I don't have to worry about it unless I fall in. Even when I'm falling in, it's good enough to keep it from getting totally soaked and ruined. But another benefit is thinking Colorado, not knowing the weather. You may get up, maybe chilly in the morning, may want to go out there with a fleece, but you get around to, you know, 1, 2 o'clock, it's warming up. It's nice to have a backpack or something just to be able to take that off, stash it in the pack, throw it up on the bank, and then you're not having to drag it along with you the rest of the day or wear it in sweat. So having some place to store extra stuff like that can be really handy, and it can make, you know, a world of difference on comfort when you're on the water. Let me look through and make sure there's nothing else important I'm forgetting. Nothing really equipment wise, that's about it, other than the fly rod and the setup. And I've got this nice little pod on the front just to carry trash. Again, not something totally necessary, but if you want to clean up after yourself and do right for the fishery that you're in, it's good to have some to go ahead and plan ahead and have some way to deal with your trash, whether it's, you know, just fishing line or whatever else. Good idea to have, and this just makes it easy. So I guess so far that's it for equipment. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of what your standard leader is going to look like for a couple of different ways of fishing you might be doing. As soon as I find my fly reel. So I'm not busting out the whole rod on this. I'm just going to take the fly reel and kind of give you the anatomy of a rig here. So obviously you have your PVC coated fly line, and that's what, you know, casts the weight of the rig. You know, obviously, you know, I think everybody knows that. You know that by now. So let's say when you check out your equipment, you know, whatever they're giving you, have a look and make sure there's no cracks in the line. Make sure it's relatively supple. That's the biggest thing. If there's cracks, chunks out of it, it's not going to float well. It's going to sink. It's going to cause issues with drag. You're not going to be able to mend the line worth of shit. And getting a drag-free drift is one of the most important things about fly fishing. And I'll link some videos that talk about getting a good drift to you. But it's more important than your fly pattern or really anything else. Making sure that bug or whatever you've got on the end of your line looks natural going through the water is paramount to everything else. So anyway, kind of got off the rails a little bit, but I guess we'll start off here. I'm trying to see if this is focused worth a damn. Yeah, so you can kind of see it a little bit. So starting off at the end of your fly line, you're typically going to have what's called a welded loop, or it should have what's called a welded loop here on the end. And what this enables you to do is make what's called a loop-to-loop connection. When you purchase your leaders from your fly shop or whatever, they already come pre-made with a perfection loop in the end, and this starts on your thick butt end of the leader. So the way you attach it, super simple. If you just remember color through clear, clear through color, that makes it easy. So I just take my colored fly line and run that loop through the perfection loop here. And then I take and make a kind of a loop on the butt section of the leader here. See, we got the connection, it's just run through. And I'm just gonna run this through the other way, through the welded loop. And then I just pull the rest of the leader through. And then kind of work the knot through, and boom, I've got a loop-to-loop connection from my leader to my fly line. And that's by far the easiest way. If you don't have a welded loop on the end of your fly line, or if it's been cut off, I'd recommend going to a fly shop somewhere in Gunnison. I'm sure they have a really good one. And I would ask them very nicely if they would mind nail knotting a section of like 30 or 40 pound mono to the end of your fly line. And what that's gonna do is they're gonna tie a nail knot on the end, which will let you tie mono to just bare slick fly line. And then what they would do is put a perfection loop at the end, so then you can just do a loop to loop from your leader to that. And you know, I've done that on a couple of lines that I've had before they got bad. You don't lose, you know, you don't have to worry about breaking off. It works just fine. Just the welded loop is ready to rock out of the package. So anyway, going down the leader, you know, obviously you have your thick butt section here. And as we go down the leader, you see it getting thinner yet. And I got some wind knots in this one. I guess I was practicing with this one. Eventually you'll get down to your thin tippet section. And when you buy a pre-made leader out of a package from like Rio or Scientific Anglers or Trout Hunter, any of those, eventually the taper is going to stop, and it's going to be diameter of line equal to your whatever the tippet size you bought for it is. So like this is what's called a 4X leader. So at the end of it here, I've got about 2 or 3 foot of 4X line, which is pretty equivalent. I think it's equivalent to like 3 pound test. 4X is actually really pretty strong. I haven't busted off many fish on 4X on these Rio PowerFlex trout leaders. Yeah, you don't need to add any tippet when you first pull one out of the package. A lot of people think you have to tie tippet on to a brand new leader, and that's not really the case. The only time you need to add tippet, which you can see I've done here, I've got a wonderful wind knot in my tippet, is when you actually get to the tapered section. So when you've kind of broke off or changed flies enough to where you get into the tapered section, that's when you'll actually take matching tippet material, and that's where you'll actually tie additional tippet onto the end of your leader. Your typical length, you're going to probably just want to buy a 9-foot leader. It's all kind of based on the size of fly that you're throwing. If you're going to Colorado, I'm sure they're going to hook you up with a 4, 5, or 6 weight. I would put $100 on it being a 5 weight, which is fine for just about any kind of leaders you want to use. It'll protect down to, I'd say, 6X tippet pretty well, and you'd have to be throwing some teeny flies to have to go to 6X. I mean, like really small. I would put, you know, this little midge I was showing you earlier, I'd probably fish that on 5X. But lost my train of thought. Go back to dissecting how do we put together a leader. How are you probably going to be fishing, and how do you set up? So I told you in the text, I think you're probably going to be doing indicator nymphing. And what a nymph is it's basically a subsurface fly that represents the larval stage of an insect. You know, everything that a trout eats in the water, or should say most of what he eats in the water, it's an insect in its larval stage.